I am Miley Bloxam, and we are here at Vicky's Fabrics in Kapa'a, Hawaii. And I did my Kaffe Mystery Clue number 2, and I thought that I would do a tutorial on this. Some tips and tricks on getting these square in a square blocks. So I'm doing the bright colorway, and I had to do 5 square in a square blocks, 3 different colors. The Delft colorway, if you're doing it, it's different colors, different fabrics. You're fussy cutting your centers. But for the square in a square blocks, they're going to be constructed the same way. And I want to help you out on that because the final size of these square in a square blocks is 6 7/8. And that is a really weird measurement for us quilters, and a little bit of a freak out on how to get to that number. So I'm going to get you to that 6 7/8 final square on the block. Okay, don't worry about it. I got your back. So the first thing you're going to do is make sure that your center squares are a very good 5-inch cut. Okay, this is your, that's the key to what I'm going to be showing you. Your center square, 5-inch cut. In the instructions, it has this pink little tip that says you may cut your squares 1/8 of an inch larger when you're cutting out your side triangles. Please add that 1/8 of an inch on. Okay, you're going to oversize these, and we're going to trim them down to the right size. So instead of 4 1/4, you're going to be cutting, instead of 4 1/8, you're going to be cutting these 4 1/2. And 2 of these squares, cut 4 1/2. You're going to cut them on the diagonal to make your 4 sides for your square in a square block. Okay, so now these are oversized, and we're going to have to trim them down. Now, from here, when doing a square in a square block, I fold my center square, and I mark your center there. I take my triangle, I fold that in half. I line up this with the center of my square. Oops, other side. I line that up with the center of my square and this edge, and I just let it flop open. So I know that my center is lined up before I do my 1/4 inch seam. Okay, so I'm going to do that on both sides. I do quilt. We're doing right sides together. I'm going to line up that center here. I'm going to sew my 1/4 inch seam, and then I'm going to press these out. I'm going to do the same process when I put these triangles on. I'm going to mark my centers, line up those centers, sew with a proper 1/4 inch seam. Okay, so if these are sewn on with a proper 1/4 inch seam, here's the trick. This center square should be 4 1/2 by 4 1/2. Okay, that's your 5-inch square seam allowances. Go ahead and measure and make sure that center square is 4 1/2 by 4 1/2. If the square is bigger than 4 1/2 by 4 1/2, you're going to want to adjust your seam allowances, take a bigger bite until it lines up. If this center square is smaller than 4 1/2 by 4 1/2, you're going to want to undo your seams and take a scant on that seam so that you get this at 4 1/2 by 4 1/2. Okay, that is your key measurement. Now, when we trim, if this is a proper 4 1/2 by 4 1/2, we are trimming these to 6 7/8 by 6 7/8. So if you have a 6 1/2 by 12 1/2 ruler, that does not work. So you got to pull out your squaring ruler, something a little bigger. Okay, and the key point that you want to look at here is your 1/4 inch line. Okay, Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay my ruler so that this point and this point is on my 1/4 inch line. Now, it is just about the 3.5 and 3.5 here. Not quite exact, but close. Just on the inside, in fact. Now, this 1/4 line mark is touching that point. This 1/4 line mark is touching that point. And I am just shaving off a teeny, teeny, teeny bit of the edge here. Okay, so that's my first trim, making sure that these points are on the 1/4 inch mark. Now, when I drop this corner into the 6 7/8, I know, odd measurement, 6 7/8, I notice that even with my trim, I still have a good 1/4 inch from here to here and here to here. So basically what I'm telling you is we're looking at a different point of reference to trim up this square. Okay? Again, I'm going to do it again. This, we want it to be 4.5 by 4.5. So I'm going to check that this center square is 4.5 by 4.5, and I'm going to now want a 1/4 inch out. This is actually already trimmed. That's the one I trimmed. That's the one I tested this whole theory on. So I'm going to make sure that this is a good 4.5 by 4.5. And I'm going to use my 1/4 inch mark. Put my 1/4 inch mark on the corners of this square. 1/4 inch mark, 1/4 inch mark. Okay. You kind of want to make sure that this is lined up. But I got a 1/4 inch and a 1/4 inch. And I'm going to trim this. And then when I flip this around and I drop this into the 6 7/8. Okay, line that up properly. Here I have a good 1/4 inch before I make that second trim. Now my block is at 6 7/8. When I do my sewing with my 1/4 inch seam allowances, I'm not going to be biting into my squares, or I'm not going to be out here where you're going to see color between the next fabric and this. Okay? Thank you for joining us today. I hope this helps. Kaffe number 2. We'll see you next week.